A man looks up into the yawning void of empty space. He asks for meaning, and the void answers back with silence. We search for something in the empty. We look for meaning in the absurdity of existence, believing that because we have crafted personalities and accumulated memories, that the universe is watching and cares for us. Life is the child growing up with an indifferent father that neither acknowledges or compliments, encourages or discourages. The universe is a cold shoulder. At times our actions seem pointless, the stuff of existence, routine, the act of merely existing in order to continue existing, always with the hope that one day we may actually live. The question of the point of it all nags at us in a corner of our mind that is so distant from us that our subconscious screaming seems a whisper easily drowned out by the noise of the day-to-day. The true absurdity of life is that there is no meaning save for the one that you ascribe to it. There's no one watching, no one judging. It's the freedom that we all claim to want but refuse to believe in. Nier Automata is an exercise in the absurd from an existentialist point of view. From the way it changes camera angles, which I believe is a constant theme in this game of seeing things from different angles, thus changing gameplay and making us aware that it is a game, to the way it handles HUD elements without breaking immersion in the world. The game seems to be testing the player to see how far it can push before the player pushes back. Or perhaps it is slowly opening us up to the absurd, allowing us to ease into it slowly, changing our expectations until we expect nothing and are grateful for what we get. Now I want to talk about Nier's story. Well, at least I wanted to. You see, I wanted to talk about it last month, but Nier has 26 different endings and about 5 different playthroughs. And from what I've seen of the criticisms of this game, people seem to think that the narrative is thin, which gives me the impression that they may not have been paying attention or just didn't try a second playthrough. Perception is reality. You may have heard of this in one of its many permutations, but no matter how it's said, essentially the meaning is what you see is what you get. The first ending of Nier is only one side of the story. But what makes this game so unique is the fact that it attempts to show you all sides of the story through its multiple playthroughs, and is, by that simple contrivance, one of the most fleshed out, if not absurdist stories ever told in video games. In this video, I'm going to try to do my best to explain to you what I think the underlying message of this game is, and hopefully in my next video I will be able to give you an in-depth look at all 5 playthroughs. So let's dig in, shall we? In the first playthrough, we're treated to the background of the world, and told very little about the 2 immediate protagonists, 2B and her male counterpart 9S. The story begins in a linear way with the player fighting through several stages, which switches the perspective from third person to overhead beat 'em up to bullet hell to even side-scrolling brawler. The simple act of changing a camera angle keeps this gameplay sequence from feeling boring, and is a technique the game will fall back on at several points in the story. It gives the game depth without spending the time and resources to design entirely new systems to fake it, and it's quite a brilliant little piece of design. It also lends an ear to the idea that this game is absurd. It's absurd to think that in the middle of the gameplay can change this drastically. If that's the case, then perhaps anything can change. And what we think we will get is not at all what is coming. The game is teaching us to expect things that are unexpected. In this way, it sort of pries open the can of our expectations and allows our imaginations to be let loose, so that when we get to the amusement park level, for example, we're ready to accept the absurdity of it all. It's also absurd to believe that a human can be birthed from an egg made of a bunch of robots, and that robots have children robots, and these things that look like wind-up toys actually have emotions, but Nier is like, yep, we're going there. In the first playthrough, this game makes no sense, and I think I know what the issue is, and I'll even go one step further as to say that it was designed this way. Imagine you're Yoko Taro for a moment. You're sitting at home, chewing on the end of a pen through your mouth hole in your giant moon man head, and you're trying to come up with a solution to the problem of, how do I tell an involved story to an audience of action gamers who don't care?
Let's do it! I'm playing some CS Source right now, we can get some footage of that!
How do you do that? Well, you could do most of the talking over comms so the action doesn't have to stop the conversation. And this is a technique employed in a lot of games like BioShock, for example. But sure, that only gets some of the story across. You need more. Or maybe you need less. What if you only told the absolutely necessary elements of your story in a 12-hour playthrough, and leave it up to the player to learn more through a second, third, fourth, or even fifth playthrough? Make it so that the story of the game is something that must be worked towards understanding. That way you don't alienate the base action gamer audience who are only interested in beating the game, and you don't alienate your core audience of OG Nier fans that expect a rich story. In this way, each playthrough isn't actually a new game plus mode, but is instead another chapter of the game. So while the game may suffer from a bit of repetitive-itis in the second playthrough, where the story differs in perspective actually draws you in to learn more about what is actually going on. Now, I've not seen a consensus on what the logic virus is, but just from playing the game I divined some truths about it. See, the red glowing eyes indicate a robot that has been infected with the virus. The problem is, since the virus is a Trojan, it can be living inside of a robot, writing and rewriting data for a while before the machine goes berserk. My theory is this: a machine is pure programmed logic. Looking at what a Trojan does, it infects the machine or computer, changes, executes, or deletes data. Knowing this, it is my theory that the machines were at one point logical. They went about their routines as robots should, serving the masters that created them. With the introduction of the logic virus, the machines became aware of more than just instructions. They experienced emotions, formed attachments to other organic and non-organic life, saw the cruelty of the androids, and sought to create a better version of themselves. Emotions were introduced that caused the machines to seemingly go berserk, when the fact is, fear causes flight or self-defense. Love causes revenge and hatred. Hatred spreads. Could this be what actually started the war? The second playthrough mimics the first one in a lot of ways, but it's not a carbon copy. For example, I can decide to kill the tank in the second playthrough, even if I didn't do that in the first. I can also kill everyone in Pascal's village, even if I didn't do that in the first playthrough. And I thought that was kind of weird, like the game was saying something about perspective or reality, but I chalked it up to the game just not wanting to tie you down to doing other things the exact same way twice. But here's the thing: when you beat the game for the first time, 2B says something that's very odd and kind of out of place. She says it always ends like this. Well, that's kind of strange. Why would she say that? It's never explained in the first two playthroughs, but my theory is this. And this is the theory of a man who hasn't played through past the second playthrough. That this is all some kind of simulation, or she's experienced this exact same event more than once and continues to experience it the same exact way and is attempting to try and break the chain of events that causes this to keep happening. And then I realized that the more that 9S hacks, the more information he becomes privy to. In the forest section in particular, he's given visions of the backstory, and without this information in our first playthrough, the whole scenario didn't make sense. See, in the first playthrough, everything the robots did seemed random. There didn't seem to be a solid understanding of their motivation, but through 9S's eyes, we could see that the machines were mimicking, without realizing they were mimicking, human values. We're also given several cutscenes that, as of yet, don't seem to make a whole lot of sense when we look at what we've seen so far. In the second playthrough, the themes of existence, reason, and purpose shine through a bit more. We're able to see the pillars of this robot society through the machines we come into contact with. First, there's the village. It's full of down-to-earth good people who live off the land and coexist with nature. Then there's the people of the desert who've turned savage due to their separation from civilization and driven insane. And then there's the forest dwellers who worship a king as if that he were their god, and who look after the prince until he's old enough to rule them. You know, they live in a castle and wait to be in service to another lord. They represent fealty. The park dwellers, who represent the fun-loving side of people, are working in a place that is there just for people to blow off steam and forget their troubles for a little while. In the second playthrough, we learn about the machines more. We learn that they love, they laugh, they're driven mad by emotion, they seek to be pretty to attract their ideal mate, and most of all, they may be more human than the androids ever will be. The robot Jean-Paul is named after the existentialist writer and philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. It should be no surprise, then, that we find Jean-Paul in a village full of robots working in a barter system. A collective, if you will, very close to a form of communism, as Jean-Paul Sartre was an admirer of Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, and, in general, Marxist beliefs. This is also significant as Jean-Paul Sartre was an existentialist thinker, and therefore the robot named after him is often caught uttering existentialist phrases. Existence precedes essence, Jean-Paul says. Jean-Paul Sartre said that the essence or purpose of an object exists even before the object has been designed. A penknife, after all, is meant for cutting, and is designed after its purpose is known. Jean-Paul the robot poses a difficult question then, because the essence of a robot form exists before he was designed. But with the addition of a consciousness, does the truth suddenly become reversed? Is he now like a human, thrust into consciousness without his consent, forced to make decisions and find his purpose after his design? What does that make the penknife? And yet, what is existence? Jean-Paul asks. I'm glad you asked. To answer that will require many long hours of, and 9S cuts off Jean-Paul and responds by calling his ramblings pointless. And to an android devoid of feelings by protocol, it may very well seem pointless to dwell on the pointlessness of existence. The entire point of this game is to argue about what makes a human human, and this is obvious to be sure. There's also the question of the absurd. How is this game absurd? A man looks up into the sky and prays to God. He asks for forgiveness for the things that he's done. He asks for good fortune, and if he doesn't get what he wants, then it isn't in God's plan. God's silence is expected. He does not expect a response. The response will be in the fulfillment or non-fulfillment of his wishes. Some people believe that they've heard back from God, yet we've decided that this is not a cause for alarm. These people do not suffer from schizophrenia. They are just simply fervent believers, but those that hear the voices of someone other than God are, well, clearly insane, right? This, to an existentialist, or even someone paying even the slightest bit of attention, seems absurd. We, as the human race, are on the verge of something that we have never thought possible. We are on the verge of creating life. Not life from within us, like in childbirth, but the creation of a life from outside of us. The life of the other. Artificial intelligence. What good are gods when those who claim to be created in his image surpass him in their creations? What happens when our creations create a form of life more complex than they? Do they become the new gods? And if so, what happens to us? What is God? What is it to be alive? What makes a person a human and a machine? If the machine can think and feel, is it still a machine? And if flesh and biology are the only thing that separate us, then the whole idea of our superiority is absurd. The idea that God is superior to us, even though our creation is far more perfect than anything he with a capital H had created, seems absurd as well. Through introspection, our very idea of being can be called into question. Long-held beliefs can be made to seem absurd, and this, I believe, is what the game is doing most of all. It's making us look at our world as less scary, filled with war and hate, and instead, the absurd, wonderful place that it could be if we chose to see it that way. So I just want to take a moment to thank everybody who's subscribed recently and to apologize for my lack of activity recently. I've been taking some time to get some life things in order, and I just want to thank you all for your patience during this time. I also want to thank everyone who's been sharing my videos with their friends. It really has helped keep me motivated to do more, and it always helps the channel when you share with people you believe would like the content. So if you'd like to see more on Nier and would like me to finish the last 3 playthroughs, just let me know in the comments below. It's pretty brutal, but I'm starting to enjoy it the more I'm learning about the game. So anyway, this has been a rant from Strat-Edgy, and now that you've heard it, go play some video games.